Okay, another couple of seconds.
Sure.
Zoom says that we're on YouTube, but we need to see it from YouTube. Okay, another couple of seconds. And there we go. So thanks. Wig, would you do the honors of getting us kicked off officially? And I'm just going to monitor
Yes, sure.
logically for a few minutes.
Yeah, so I'm Wig Zamor from Somerville, a longtime member along with Stefan and Leonard. I have a brand new or almost brand new Dell laptop, and I can't get the video to work, but the audio works fine. I'm happy to be
Well, the audio is very low, like very low. Barely hear you.
Okay. Is this better?
Much better.
Yes, much better.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Yep.
Okay.
Wig, there's a good chance here that you the little cover over your camera is done. If you look at your camera on the top of your screen, there's a little slide that'll uncut. There you go.
Brilliant, Greg. Brilliant.
Wow.
Wow. I couldn't even see that. I guess. Well, thank you.
Wow.
Holy crow. I've been in the dark for 2 months or 3 months.
Oh no.
Thank
Oh
you.
no.
Yeah,
All right.
you know, I can
Looks
only
good, Wig.
feel it.
Yeah,
Okay,
wow.
so let's go with other folks' introductions. Craig, why don't you go next?
Hi, Craig Laskowski, apparent IT expert and public member. I live in the town of Milton.
And Len, why don't you go? I think everyone knows you, but
Yeah, sure. Leonard Digginsby, and hoping that Craig gets a job with MBTA and OCC or someplace to help with their staffing shortage. So yeah, I live in East Arlington. We pretty much use the Red Line on a daily basis, twice a day. And I would use the 77 more, except that I'm just walking as much as possible these days. So I'm one of those people who's using the bus less, not because of the service, just because I'm just walking more.
well, that's great. Stefan, you okay to introduce yourself?
Of course. Yep. I am Stefan Wunsch. I'm the co-chair of the committee overall and the co-chair of the subcommittee on operations, marketing, and communications. I'm in Lynn right now, as I've been working from home since the pandemic, and I miss being out on the commuter rail and red line, green lines, but I try to keep myself on top of everything that's going on. Thank you very much, Representative Garbely, for joining us. And I'll turn it over to either Len or Wig, because the agenda that we have. Oh, and I don't see anybody on YouTube, and we don't seem to have any attendees from the public at the moment. So as far as public comment period, unless one of the members of the committee wants to say something under the auspices of public comment, I think we can move right into our guest.
Well, I'll make this is Wig. I'll make a really short public comment. Others may know more about this than myself, but we are still expecting the Long Branch of the Green Line to open later this month. We don't expect any celebration. We expect it to be a soft opening, and maybe we'll, try to have some refreshments for families or something like that, just locally. I think part of that may be that we did have a lot of speeches in the first branch, the Union Square opened, and given the T's struggle with maintenance recently, I think we don't want to take away too much spotlight from that, which we hope will continue. So let me stop there. And Len, do you want to introduce our guest or set it up?
Sure. So I'm happy to welcome back. I forget how many times at this point, because Representative Garbely is so generous with his time. A representative from Arlington and part of Medford. He'll tell us which Middlesex district when he speaks, if he wants. Representative Garbely is on the MBTA caucus, and he tells other committees if he wants me, but as I said, he's very supportive, of us, the Rock, me, and certainly a big proponent of public transit. So I think he's just here to answer questions from us. I didn't ask him to do a presentation. I think we just want to get a handle on what we can do to support the T, in the next legislative session, meaning maybe some ideas he might have about legislation that he's interested in proposing, or that other colleagues are just proposing for the next legislative session in regard to the T, but transit in general and transportation. So with that longest introduction, I'll just turn it over to Representative Yarkley to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Len, so much. You know, Len is a select board member in the town of Arlington. He's one of our outstanding elected officials. People love Len, and whenever people love him because he does a great job, but they also love him because he's a hard worker. And I love him because he is focused on public transportation as a good, and knows more about the MBTA than most people in the entire town. So whenever Len asks me to speak to you guys or to come to the meeting and share some reflections, and I never hesitate, because I know it'll be a fruitful conversation. So where to begin, I think hopefully this will be more of a dialogue, but where to begin is, I think we're all aware of some of the challenges the MBTA has faced, in terms of lack of revenue, some safety issues, obviously a lot of safety issues, some operational issues. We've heard a lot in regards to the future of the T, in regards to the gubernatorial campaign, which obviously just ended. We all, I'm sure, read deeply the safety report, and I am sure many of you have been following the Joint Committee on Transportation public hearings on that, which had several people testify and several thoughts, and I'm sure you have all paid attention closely to some of the statements that have been made by some of my colleagues about their thoughts of the future of the MBTA. And I'm sure you've paid attention to what Governor-elect Healy has said about the MBTA. I think what is very clear is that this is the biggest, or one of the biggest, issues that her administration wants to tackle. And because the Speaker of the House has not put forth his agenda for the upcoming 2-year session, I don't want to say that it's going to be a top priority of the legislature, but what I will say is it's a top priority of mine. And I would venture to guess that it will be a #1 topic of the legislature, on how we move forward, and what it will look like. We have 200 members of the legislature, so I think it'll be maybe a little different than what we think it should be. But in terms of what my hope would be, is that it is a legislation focused on improving public safety, accountability, and what I would say is accurately or adequately funding the MBTA. I've said for a long time that the sales tax is an inadequate way to fund public transportation. It's not reliable. We know that when the economy is good and when the economy is bad. So, whatever the conversation entails, and, I know there's been a lot of public comment. There's been a lot of, committee activity from the Joint Committee on Transportation. Whatever the structure would be, the future structure of the MBTA governance, I know that's always on the top of everyone's mind when we talk about legislation. I think we can get in the weeds of that, and I'm sure that will be part of the conversation in any pending legislation. I just hope we don't lose the importance that we can restructure it all we want, if we don't adequately fund it and come up with a revenue source that is adequate, it will fail. And that has always been my concern about any pending conversation related to governance of the MBTA. But it is very clear through the new administration coming in January and the legislature that this, and our constituents, that this is on the mind of everybody. And so I anticipate a piece of legislation, and I expect a rigorous process with public debate, public conversation, committee involvement, you know, the administration putting forth recommendations. And so my hope is, as we move forward, we don't focus on doing harm, but actually trying to fix the issue. And so I would welcome your thoughts on what that should look like. And I look forward to being active and having this group being actively engaged on what that pending legislation would look like. And I know I haven't brought too many specifics, and one of the reasons is we're not sworn in. We have a new legislature, a new governor being sworn in, and it would be premature for me to try to guess what it would be. But as I have told the speaker, that I want a process that involves everybody, from the public to advocacy groups to legislators to professionals around the country that deal with transit systems on a day-to-day basis, and the experts that are here in Massachusetts, no doubt about it. So I would love to hear your thoughts, and I look forward to an engaging process that I think is going to take a lot of work, but hopefully we'll get a better product.
Well, that's a terrific opening. I wonder, Carl, do you want to introduce yourself? You came on just as our guest was starting to speak.
Thanks. I'm Carl Seglum. I'm a Brighton resident and member of the Rider Oversight Committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Carl. So who would like to, from the committee, offer some beginning thoughts here?
Can I ask a couple of quick questions? I just want to get out of the way.
Sure.
We really get into things. We might run out of time. So when do bills normally get filed, Representative Garvey? Not so much, I guess, by the legislators, but legislators, of course, sponsor bills, but when I was working with the real estate transfer fee folks, as I recall, we tried to get our bill filed like in January, February.
Mm-hmm.
Is that,
yeah.
Is it that early? Okay. So go ahead.
So that was a little different of an issue because it was a home rule petition. So there's a statewide bill, right, around the real estate transfer fee, right, and then there's communities like Arlington that move forward on that process through a home rule petition.
But I was talking about the statewide.
Okay,
one.
Yeah. So the statewide one would most likely, so we get sworn in January,
right,
whenever that is, the same time the governor does, the same time the state senators do. And then usually the legislation would be filed timely.
Oh, we lost you. We lost you at timely. The legislation would be filed timely. Then we lost you.
So sorry, someone was calling me.
Okay.
The problems of doing these meetings on a cell phone. So my apologies. So
no
I don't have an exact date of when it is. I can get that to you, Len, tomorrow. I haven't moved that far ahead yet,
right,
but it'll be in January.
Okay.
And members usually have a week to 2 week window to file legislation.
Right.
So that will be the process and what we wait for, right? So when bills get filed, that's the first part of the process. Then the clerk of the House and the clerk of the Senate assign every bill that gets filed with a docket number.
Right.
And then once they go through each bill, it'll be assigned a House bill number, and the ones filed in the Senate will be assigned a Senate bill number. And then they wait. They wait for the Senate president and the Speaker of the House to appoint their committees. So we'll have, the Speaker and the Senate president will appoint the chairs of each committee and the members of those committees. And usually the Senate does it a little earlier than the House does because they only have 40 members. And then usually the Speaker in the past has assigned committees by the end of February. So once the committee memberships are assigned, then the clerk of the House and the clerk of the Senate will send, in this case, all legislation related to public transit and bikeways and other types of transportation legislation to the Joint Committee on Transportation. And we will start our work most likely sometime in March.
Right.
If the membership of the committees are assigned by the last week of February.
Right. And so, all right. So anything that we wanted someone, we have to get sponsors. So if we were to write something, ideally we try to write something with you, but I don't know if that's like imposing or inappropriate. But let's say we wrote on our own, and we'd have to find the sponsor by early January in order to get it filed, right?
I think that's right.
Okay. All right.
And I will send you offline, the dates, the specific dates in January, when there is a deadline, obviously, to file legislation, but there is not a deadline anymore to get co-sponsors for a legislation. Usually that deadline was 2 weeks after a bill had been filed.
Right.
But now the House, I think smartly, has decided to have the deadline be when a committee reports a bill out. So that gives us several months, potentially a year, for members to sign on.
Right. But we do have to get someone to sponsor it, though, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And I'm happy to have conversations with you about that. But obviously, I'm not the only state rep and state senator who care about transportation. So there's a lot of dialogue we can have.
Right. Gotcha. So yeah, I could ask more questions, but I'll stop. I'll save the second one for later on. Let people get.
And I do want to say, I'm sure many of you heard some of the quotes of various legislators. I am not attaching myself to those comments. Everyone has a right to say what they feel about the future of the MBTA and how it should be governed.
Oh, we lost you. Have to govern.
I know someone called me again, so
No
my apologies. So my focus is that this is a number one priority of the legislature, and that we do a piece of legislation that we can be proud of. I've been in the House for 15 years, and we've done legislation nibbling on the edges, things like raising the gas tax, raising the tobacco tax, to raise minimal revenue, but certainly not enough to give public transportation what it really needs. And so my hope, and what I'll be advocating for with the Speaker, is that we really focus on prioritizing the MBTA. And now, as you know, with the millionaires tax passing, we do have close to $1 billion, hopefully, for public transportation, that I hope will be used. The intent the voters and the legislation has, that would be a supplement, not a supplant, of current priorities and how we spend it on transportation or education.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. I can say more, but I'm going to stop and let my rock colleagues.
I've got a couple questions, but I'll just feed them in one at a time. Just by background, not recently, but years ago, I did help Rep. Provo with the Healthy Transportation Compact, and that took a couple years on her part. It took 3 to 6 months for us to frame it and do a first draft, but it took her a couple years to modify it and push it through. And as folks may remember, Senator Jalen asked me to write the bond bill funding for the Green Line, and sent
I
me
remember that.
sent me a bond bill that was about 600 pages long and needed to have the Green Line inserted overnight, which was a bit of a surprise for me. So two very different experiences. But the question I guess I would start with, first I'd say I did check the fuel taxes state by state earlier today, as I do from time to time, and Massachusetts is about 2/3 of the way down the list, and raises vastly less revenues via motor fuel taxes than California and Pennsylvania, which
Yep.
are by far the leaders in the US in that regard. California has the advantage of being dominant in truck freight, and they do tax diesel at a higher rate. And Pennsylvania had the most bridges and roads collapsing of any state about 15 years ago. So they bit the bullet back then. I have two questions that are just background, and I'll stop there. The first one is, do we have a sense of the revenues that might be available for transportation from all of the COVID and other Biden-led initiatives of the last few years? I guess let me just ask that one. Do we have a sense of what the federal list of unusual revenue sources is at this point?
Well, that's a great question, and something that I'm trying to get a handle on. You know, we have different pockets of money, right? Most of the
Yes.
ARPA money now has been spent, with the second round that was spent through the economic development bill. And a lot of that was not, we used it on water infrastructure, but we did not use it on road and bridge infrastructure, mainly because we're waiting for the federal infrastructure money coming down the pike from the Biden administration. My understanding is that Massachusetts is going to see, hopefully, if there's no clawback effort in the House, but now with the Dems, winning the Senate, I don't think that will be fruitful. So, back when we were in conversations, it was looking like Massachusetts could see around $9 billion out of the infrastructure plan. Now, in terms of if all of that is for transit, I don't believe it is. I think some of it was earmarked for electrification and other efforts, but there is a significant amount of money coming to Massachusetts for infrastructure, which I really do hope we're going to utilize.
Okay, and thank you for that. The second part really piggybacks on that. Do you think it would be possible to put forward a kind of constant graduated increase in fuel taxes with an intent, one, to make sure that every county or every MPO got back what they put in, so there would be no prejudice with regard to parts of the state, but also some provision that those increases in fuel taxes be spent on electrification appropriate to the various areas, whether it was rapid recharging for places that are likely to have more roadway vehicles, whether it was more transit that was electrified in the urban areas like the Boston core. So I'll stop there, but that would be,
well,
and yeah.
One of my big complaints of the 1986 law, with everyone getting very small refund checks through the income tax, was it was around $3 billion. And wouldn't it have been an amazing investment to take that $3 billion and put it towards electrification? Like, wouldn't that have been a better use for that funding? But it's that's in the past. So, I certainly would support legislation like that. And I certainly, when I advocate with the speaker and with my colleagues, that will certainly be part of the list of things that I would argue for. And you are absolutely right, Wig, and I absolutely know that. I remember sitting with you in the transportation building on meetings on the Green Line over 10 years ago. So
Yep.
know better than anybody that when we talk about investment in public transportation, we regularly hear from folks in the Berkshires, Cape Cod, Merrimack Valley, that we don't do enough for RTAs. So I think certainly when the speaker, if he potentially is looking for a package to try to get support, is certainly our ability to say that we're bringing money back to Berkshires, back to Cape Cod, is critical for that. So this might be a good, I certainly think a good thing to, throw in as a possibility.
Okay, thank you very much. So who else has a question for Representative Garbely? Carl or Craig? Len? Stefan?
Well, I
Craig,
think
go
Craig
ahead.
just put his camera.
Yeah, Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in for a minute. As another longtime member, I feel like we've had a lot of the same challenges that the T has had regarding it's tough to focus both on day-to-day operations and on these longer term projects. It's very easy to just get excited about the longer term projects, whether it's electrification or expanding the Green Line or over the years talking about north-south rail connector or any station improvements or possible inner loop, all those kind of things. So I'm trying recently to be try to stop being distracted from those things and try to be focused more on core operations, because that seems to be where a lot of the findings were and where a lot of the challenges lie. Do you have any thoughts in terms of how legislation could help or impact, not just funding big projects and in the federal money for big projects, but how and I think you spoke to a little bit about ensuring that the T is properly funded going forward, and that's a big part of the fix. But any thoughts in terms of how legislation could help with day-to-day operations of the T, whether that's funding or that's oversight or any of those things that you think are kind of missing?
So one of the issues, and I think this, is that there is a lot of opinion among legislators about the MBTA in general, right? And I think we've heard comments from legislators as drastic as disbanding the MBTA, having the DOT pick up the role of the MBTA. So I'm not saying we do something like that. I want to see the data. But my concern would be that potentially could be the focus of an oversight piece of legislation, rather than how do you properly fund a 21st century transit system. And I'm not saying we disband the T. I'm not recommending that's what we do. I'm more focused on properly funding it. I strongly believe in oversight and making sure that they do the things that we want them to do and keep us safe. And, that's, one of the reasons, I think 10 years ago, we put the oversight board in place with that goal. So, it'll be interesting to see which direction the legislation moves in. My hope is it's around funding. But I do venture to guess, because some of the voices are very prominent who have called for the T to, kind of be changed. And so I would not be surprised if that's part of the conversation as well. And my hope is, Craig, is that, when the Speaker or the Senate President decide to put an omnibus bill together that has several moving pieces to it, I hope it is based on, you know, what can we actually do and measure that will improve the quality of public transportation in the Commonwealth. And so I don't have all the answers to that, but I hope that when we do put a bill together, it's grounded on moving forward and not as a punishment to the T, using the safety report from the feds as the barometer. If that makes any sense to you.
Yeah,
Oh, you're muted.
understood.
No, it does make a lot of sense, and I appreciate your comments there. I agree with you both in terms of, you know, punishment to me would come across, it would simply be grandstanding, right? Like proving that proving that you were right and the T was always bad. I'm not saying you, your colleagues. Yeah, you know, I don't think that's a productive way forward. That's more grandstanding than anything else. But I do like where you're going with it in terms of a, you know, as part of the legislation, a data-driven approach in putting measurements in there, not simply, you know, I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think where I agree is you know, maybe there is some kind of reorg, but we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Definitely, there's a funding issue that we need to resolve. And then there's, but then I think a third important leg of that stool is then measurement of how do we know the changes we've made are successful? How do we know we're better a year from now or 2 years from now with additional funding, with a org redesign or with a new oversight function? So I applaud you for mentioning the data-driven approach in measurement.
Yeah, you know, I'm concerned that if you just, you know, I'm not saying we're not going to be thoughtful. I just hope that we're really thoughtful on the process of how we put forward a piece of legislation that involves, you know, riders, constituents, engineers. You know, I would much rather us go slow and deliberate and make sure that we really do assess everything we're trying to do, rather than just, you know, restructure the functions and take away the authority from the MBTA and put it into MassDOT. Like, you know, look, that might, you know, maybe that is the solution. I don't know. You know, I have concerns with that, but let's say they do. You know, I just hope we're more deliberative in the process and really focus on what we want to see happen in public transportation.
Stefan, do you have some thoughts or questions you want to share?
Yes, I do. Thank you. The first is I just have to make a comment, an observation about how I feel so lucky to talk to legislators like you, Representative Garbely, because it gets me out of my little hole where I fall in sometimes being myopic and thinking only in terms of the MBTA service region. I mean, now admittedly, we are our mandate is to be riders overseeing the MBTA. We're not chartered with rider oversight of the RTA in the Berkshires, but there are RTAs throughout the state, and transit in the MBTA district, the MBTA service area, I mean, is only one part of the greater whole. So I guess my question for the moment is, how do you see that there's any role in for a group like ours to not be advocates as much as to be assisting with messaging, if that's even applicable, for the need to direct more state resources, even federal, to the MBTA service area, and help coordinate that with the needs of the rest of the state? And in other words, do you see that we should get out of our little bubble at all of what's admittedly our charter, MBTA? Do you see anything that we could do to contribute at a more statewide level, even if it's just communication and messaging?
Well, I certainly hope so. First of all, this group is filled with individuals who, have background in public, transit planning, and the MBTA, your riders, you hear from a lot of people. So on that front, I certainly hope that members of the legislature can call on your expertise, not just advocacy, but as you said, your expertise. Whenever the speaker is trying to put forth a piece of legislation and then trying to get the votes to pass it, we have 160 reps, right? And as you point, they represent every area across the district. And, when I knock doors politically for colleagues of mine in Western Mass, I regularly get the response, well, Boston doesn't care about us. What are you going to do to get money back to the Berkshires or back to our RTA? So, the speaker always has to think about, putting forth a piece of legislation that is going to benefit the entire Commonwealth, not just Quincy or the Boston area. That's just part of being able to count votes and get to 81, right? It's just an important part of doing the job of the speaker and getting a piece of legislation passed. It also wouldn't be right just to think about Boston, right? We want to, in the MBTA caucus, like you, Stefan, we focus on, the MBTA area and, everything from the commuter rail to the trains, to the buses, to the ferries, to the ride. However, we want to improve public infrastructure across the entire state, in all 351 cities and towns. So, when the process is put forward in January onward, in terms of what the process is going to be like, I would absolutely love it. If I could get this group to have a meeting with the chair of transportation or whoever is leading the charge on passing a piece of legislation, because I think that would be really valuable for both leadership in the House and the Senate, to hear from you, and to be, better educated in terms of what is happening with the MBTA right now and how do we move forward. To me, that's really important. And so I think this group can be incredibly valuable in moving forward. I just can't give specifics because, I am not going to be the one to set the process. But when I do know about it, I would very much reach out to Len and invite this group to come and meet with, the chairman of transportation, and I will be there in that meeting with all of you if you want to come in. I think that's something that would be very valuable. And I think this group can be active in organizing riders and other groups to advocate for a better direction that a pending legislation could go.
Well, can I say something, Stefan, or do you want to say more?
Go right ahead, Wig. I mean, Len. Sorry.
So I hadn't really heard about proposals or ideas about expanding the T or having NASDAQ take over. I just get sometimes just so caught up in Arlington stuff, and also I pretty much read the decks that are presented to the board of directors meeting for my updates to the T. But you know what? I could get on board with that. Just in theory, it's all the devil, the genius is in the details. But the T is really not independent. It's an authority that can issue debt, bonds. It's the authority. But everyone knows that the legislature controls T, and the governor controls the T. By virtue of having the Secretary of Transportation on the board of directors, but we just know that there's little to no independence there. So that would just get rid of that whole illusion. And I also feel strongly that we should make our whole transportation network a transit and freight system. And I think having MassDOT, having the T directly controlled by MassDOT would make that easier and make it really clear to folks, that we could move in that direction with with less friction, at least. And one of the things I was going to ask you about, I'll just kind of roll this into, like, one of my big frustrations, and we've talked about this, is how the MBTA handles its property. And we have a situation in Arlington, where we want to build a bridge, from a low affordable housing unit to the bike path, and we can't get that done. And it's hard to get anyone at the T to respond to it. And I was going to ask you if you think that that's something we could do, maybe with the two new administrations, both with respect to the governorship, but also with respect to the T itself. And would it be possible maybe pass some kind of legislation that would make it easier? Because that's just all part of sustainability and active transportation. And I just feel that maybe if we got rid of a layer, and just kind of have MassDOT running the T, it would be fine. We all know that the main problems with the T is the staffing. The problems aren't going to go away. If MassDOT takes over, with respect to getting service ramped back up, I think it might. I just think there's a certain efficiency to it that appeals to me. But like I said, I'm not really. The genius is in the tail. So, but if you might think that I'm automatically against it, and actually I'm kind of more automatically for it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And the only reason I have brought that up is because back in July, Bill Strauss, who's the House chair of the Transportation Committee, at a hearing, and it was covered extensively in the press. You can Google it and look it up. He asked whether the T is still needed, and suggested, can this agency be rolled into MassDOT to do its functions? So, I think everything will be on the table, and I think that's healthy. I think that's important. I hope to me the process is just as important in moving forward on what a pending piece of legislation would look like. On that other piece, more Arlington focused, why don't we talk tomorrow or the next day? Because I had reached out to the T a couple of years ago on that, and unfortunately the bureaucracy is real. So when I was talking to Maura Healy, that was certainly one of the things I'm hoping she can address as governor.
Yeah, or maybe the new general manager or the board of directors, because I was hoping with the new board of directors we could get some movement on it. I held off on moving on it because there was someone at CTPS who had offered to work with me on it, but at this point, that it's very clear that's not going anywhere. So I kind of regret waiting as long as I did, to move forward with this person. But now I kind of want to see if I can get the ball rolling on that again. So yeah, we can talk offline or outside of this meeting. Thank you. But I will say it's not simply Arlington specific, because we're not the only community that has issues with accessing bike paths and that is or accessing the bike paths that are owned by the T. And so I think if we could solve the problem for Arlington, maybe solve it for other communities.
Sorry, Len, just to clarify, you said this is a bike path, but it's owned by the T? Is it a former right of way?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is this the Minuteman Trail?
Yeah, that is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And there was a affordable housing complex that was built, and now, unfortunately, the people in Arlington inappropriately said that we'd be able to build that bridge from that complex to the bike path. They shouldn't have said that, until they had it guaranteed. And so people are feeling, well, you said we'd get this, now we didn't get it. And so it's really on the town. But at the same time, the town, I think, felt that it shouldn't be difficult to get this, but the deal is that if they are being charged or being forced to get an insurance that is just prohibitively expensive, and so I understand. There's no maliciousness here. It's more so, what can we do though to make it easier for communities to access the active transportation, And I think there's a way to do it. But and I will talk, and then I'll communicate back to you anything relevant, and certainly things that can be applied to other communities.
Len, if I could jump in with
I'm done. Thank you.
With two thoughts. One, there's a lot of precedent for connections to the community path in Somerville. So there may be someone who knows the history of those connections, and some of them are to newer projects, newer multifamily projects. The second thing I think of is Amber Christofferson was the bike and path and active transport manager for the Mystic River Watershed Association. And she did a phenomenal job in the last 10 years building a path network on both sides of the Mystic. She has just moved to head up path networks for the state. And you may want to contact her. She has a wealth of experience of dealing with it. And I can search to see if I've got a contact for her that's not MWRA, but even if it's Mystic River Watershed, I have a meeting coming up with Patrick, who runs the Mystic River Watershed. I'm sure I can find her email. If that would be helpful for you, just get in touch with me.
Yeah, well, I've typed these up, and so I think my path of action is to first talk with Representative Garbley tomorrow or later on this week, and then from there, there will be forks in the decision tree that may incorporate what you've suggested. Nonetheless, it'll be good to talk to these folks at some point, because working with Somerville is always a pleasure. And then Amber seems like a very interesting person, so it'd be good to touch base. So thanks.
Okay. Do other folks have questions for Representative Garbley? Carl, do you have a question, or anybody have additional questions?
I've got one more, but I don't want to take away from Craig.
Okay.
Maybe we'll make this the last one, though, so we can let.
Okay.
Okay. So, well, just a very quick thing, I think. And this may be a question for everybody here, not just the representative. Do we collectively think that the current legislation, when it comes to the rollout and, more importantly, the enforcement of bus-only lanes, is adequate? And I say that not. I acknowledge that I'm not fully read up on it yet. But since we have the representative here, and between the six of us, does anybody feel like the legislation, when it comes to bus lanes, particularly the enforcement, is lacking and needs to be beefed up? Or are we saying, do we think that it's okay for now and we'll continue to roll out dedicated bus lanes and just see how it goes for the next X number of months or years?
Well, my expert, when I have dealt with that, it goes community by community. Like I was in Everett looking at the rapid lane, and everybody was violating it and nobody was providing any type of enforcement. And it really was sad to see. But I think that's different in Cambridge, different in a lot of other communities, but I just don't know how you would beef it up, because it would take local enforcement to really hold people accountable. I know there is the camera legislation that has been around for a long time, which makes sense to me. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm certainly a technologist. I make my living in a technology field, so I'm also in favor of camera-based enforcement. I don't know if there's current funding for that. I don't know if that would require an act of the legislature to be able to appropriate funding for technology-based transit dedicated lane enforcement, but I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on it, because in Lynn, we are slated to be getting a pair of dedicated bus lanes down Western Avenue, Route 107, which is a major bus corridor. I think there's 6 routes that go down that part of Western Avenue. And I'm not very optimistic because the Northern Strand bike trail was just laid down with dedicated bike lanes. And I have seen close to zero municipal parking enforcement of that dedicated bike lane by the city of Lynn. So when it comes to this bus corridor rollout, I'm really concerned. But I hear your point about, yeah, the Carl had put a point in the chat about state legislation would be required for adopting that. I would certainly be glad to help to assist with that.
Excellent. Excellent. And, you know, I will work with Len, but, you know, I would very much, as we move forward in the legislative session and the process, I would definitely welcome this group's involvement in any way you'd like to be involved.
And I just jump into this is Craig. The bus lane, we've looked at bus lanes a lot, and it's a challenging issue. I think overall we're all supportive of bus lanes. Some members of the committee very much so. I've more just I guess I'm more of the glass half empty on it. That I've seen enough real world examples of best intentions with bus lanes. You know, just either the paint wears down over the years, or the markers are knocked down because snowplows, kind of take out the markers, or there's a lack of enforcement. I've just seen a lot of challenges over the years. And the reality is we're not some new, relatively new city west of the Mississippi that's got huge boulevards that you can easily carve out space for bikes, people, buses, and cars. That we're dealing with, the cow paths that were paved 300 years ago, and there's limited space, so it's a zero-sum game. And if you do things like cameras, there's spaces, there's spots where delivery trucks just need to stop and do a delivery because there's no other spot to do it. So right. I don't know so it's going to be. I'm still open to trying bus lanes, but I think it's going to be you have a challenge going forward. I'll end it with I appreciate the challenge you have going forward, crafting nuanced language around it to deal with the reality that is Boston streets, the zero-sum game, and how you craft legislation that helps the problem but doesn't isn't punitive to given the realities of the ground game.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Rep. I mean, I'll be in touch, and we can set up some time to talk. I mean, we'll at least set up a time, even if it's not tomorrow or the next day. I mean, we'll definitely move forward, sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Len, and thank you, everybody. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you. My pleasure. Have a great night, everybody.
Take care. So yeah, Craig, I mean, I hear you, but I think, there are other ways to do freight, than in big trucks. I mean, that may be the cheapest way, and to a certain extent, the most efficient way given the status quo. But if we do want to make transit work better and make active transportation more enjoyable, or encourage people to do it, we might want to try doing freight in smaller units. I know there's some exploration in doing that, so that you don't have a big truck, So I'm just saying there may be some alternatives.
I mean, it's an elegant solution. It's a who owns that, right? Like if I own a small bodega that's on a thoroughfare that has a bus lane installed on it, and I've lost my parking spots that my delivery driver uses in front of it, I need to ensure that I can't call up Coca-Cola and say send a smaller truck. I have a bus lane. I get the delivery driver that gets the delivery driver to me that gets me by a product that I can sell in my store. So I don't know where. I don't know the guy who owns the business can't influence how he gets their deliveries. The MBTA can't influence, what trucks are going to go down that street. So I don't disagree with your solution. I just don't know how we get to implementation.
Yeah, well, I mean, the implementation isn't something that happens right now, and so right now, I mean, you can't do that. I mean, but we could put in place. Well, first off, you need to have the technology widely deployed, and by technology, I mean like lots of smaller vehicles deliver freight, and maybe even modified in some way so that make it more freight friendly. Then you have a policy, around that, and so it's not like you're being treated special, by a given company. That's just the way freight's delivered in those areas. So I was saying us move towards something like that.
I guess like what saying that's all true. Does that mean though that can you plow ahead with something like bus lanes in particular areas where there is an impact without those two other things and without the technology or the policies in place ahead of it? So what comes first? To a certain degree, it's a field of dreams here, where we're building the bus lanes, hoping everything kind of magically figures it out. Gets figured out after the fact.
Yeah, no. I would say it would be good to have the freight policy, in place before the bus lanes. And it may very well be that people weren't aware of the extent to which the freight would be a problem until they put the bus lanes there. I like to think that's not the case. So I like to think that folks felt, well, we can't change the freight stuff. Fast. So we'll put the best bus lanes in. And at least something will be better than nothing. And it may be that's the case. It may be not. Maybe that that was a mistake. So, and the other way I think would work too. And so the freight thing is separate. That has to be solved separately. When it comes to cars, using the bus lanes, I think we just need to create more incentive for people to get out of their cars, and or use smaller vehicles, or use vehicles that can park elsewhere than on the curb of the major street. These are all longer term things, but I don't think they are. Yeah, I think they are things that can take place within the span of a generation, even less. We just have to determine that that's what we want to do, and then put the policies in place to do it. So they don't require any new technology, really. Yeah.
Yep.
Just some thoughts.
Yeah, in my mind, I'm pondering why it is that for dedicated bus lanes there can't just be municipal regulation that requires deliveries at night. Deliveries between midnight and 5 a.m. I mean, that admittedly that's going to be a difficulty for small mom and pop shops, but if it's hindering a significant amount of underserved population by blocking access to a bus lane, we're all in this together.
Cambridge, even Mass Ave and Harvard Square, for years has allowed tractor trailers in mid to late evening. It's not in the middle of the night. There's still people out and about, but there's enough reduction in hourly traffic that they're able to take up full lanes for stretches of Mass Ave and the other feeders into Harvard Square. And it's not that disruptive. You may have to wait 30 seconds that you wouldn't otherwise have to wait.
But I would say it doesn't have to be midnight to 5 a.m. Stuff. I think, if they did it like from noon till 3 in the daytime, because there are times when I'm walking around in the middle of the day, and like Mass Ave in Arlington, which is really a pretty busy thoroughfare, is just a desert. There's just like hardly anything there. And I'm thinking, this is the middle of the day. He's like, now bring in your freight, and the bus lane or the bike lanes aren't as available, but there's nothing going on the street, relatively speaking. And so now it's like no one. So, And if people know that's what to expect, I mean, everyone knows what that's to expect, then you can kind of plan around it. I mean, the frustrating thing is when you expect something different, or when you expect something, then you get something different. I mean, it's like, I mean, it's frustrating at a minimum, and
Yeah.
counterproductive, really, generally.
Yep. And just because I have it up just real quick, I just got to show. This is the part of Lynn where we're talking about that express bus lane, and good luck getting an express bus lane in there, even along with the current traffic lanes. But anyway,
No, and that's a really good example, right? If you pivot to the left there, there's a little store that.
oh yeah, sorry, that's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it. This little store, I believe, was what. Yeah, I mean, and this is not casting aspersions on this store or the delivery company in any way. It's just illustrative of how this is going to have a dedicated bus lane in it. Yikes! Wow.
And I actually think it's one of the bigger streets I've seen.
Oh yeah, good point.
Well, MBTA is doing MPO is doing a really big freight study. I mean, with MAPC, this is going to be like part of what they're looking at. It's like, how can we deliver freight differently?
So we have a small crew here. Do we want to? And I think we're right on agenda. Do we want to move through the additional? Because this is a fruitful conversation, but I feel like it's something we can also deep dive in subcommittee as well.
Yeah, it's true.
Yep. Sure.
So then the idea for unified planning work program, I've gotten the guidelines for it, and so I want to see if the group would be interested in us proposing that based on the next travel demand model, that we ask for a study to see what components in that model can drive people to using transit more, and so it'd be kind of like one of those basic science type of studies, but it needs someone to kind of propose it. Now we could leave it to CTPS to propose it as a staff study, but there's not a whole lot of money dedicated to staff. And so we would kind of put together what the scope of it, and what we'd like to see out of it, and then they could price it out, and then depending on the cost and the other priorities, other studies and competition, it might get done, So, I'd be happy to work with putting together the language and whatnot. But I was thinking that we could do it, and alternatively, I could ask the advisory council to do it, the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. We're on that, but I'm kind of thinking that it might be better not to have the advisory council proposing studies, since we also help rank the studies, and so I kind of like to keep us a little above the fray, for lack of a better phrase. But maybe that doesn't make any sense because in that group, the individuals there are just holding the places for their organizations. And so we're going to then say no organization that's a part of it. We can propose a study. That doesn't seem like a good idea to me. So my point is that if the group doesn't want to do it, there's another avenue for it. But if the group doesn't want to do it, I'm more interested in why the group doesn't want to do it, because that may indicate to me it's not a good thing to pursue, regardless of how I try to who the vector is or who the proponent is.
Okay.
Lynn, what is the timing on that?
Well, I need to get the proposal in probably by within 2 months for sure.
Well, I'm wondering if we could have somebody from CTPS who's worked on that part of the federal framework to just come in and give the whole committee here some examples of projects of the past, just a few of them that they think people on this committee might be interested in hearing about, that have already been done, And I think that would help other members of the committee understand that process. That I'm just a thought.
Yeah, that's fine. That's interesting. You know, it'd be a way to kind of like vet the idea.
Right.
So kind of run the idea by
Right.
kind of plant the idea subliminally, you know, so that when the proposal comes up, they're like, oh, I've heard that, and they can kind of think it's their idea. I'm just so you're devious, Wing. I got you. I know you're up to.
Well, I just, you know, I spent 10 years going to those meetings, but I'm way out of date.
Right.
You are up to date, but not many people actually know about how that process works and what types of things have gotten done. And, you know, I think we would want them to emphasize interesting projects that they've had experience with, but
not many people. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm done. I'm good.
No, I was just saying. I was just gonna make a joke. Like, not many people know how it works. Like, hardly anyone knows how it works, and that's understandable. Yeah,
good point.
It's like it's quite understandable.
Yeah. Well,
you know?
I'll say this. I with 2 clicks. Well, I guess with only 2 steps, I pulled up the current federal fiscal year 2023 UPWP.
Yeah,
which I don't think I had seen before, even though it says it was endorsed by the MPO in August of this calendar year. And the more that I read it, the more I'm interested in, I'll just say being involved. I don't know whether it's a contributing, but I don't think I had actually read a UPWP or even seen it that I can remember. So I'm finding this kind of appealing, Len. Take that for what it's worth.
Sure. Well, the thing that I think is most interesting, the thing that changes the most from year to year is the chapter on discrete studies. I think it might be chapter 6. I mean, so that's where I would say start from there. I mean, and then the rest of it is just kind of explaining to you how the NP works and where the funding comes from. You know, so I mean, whatever chapter says discrete studies, I mean, that's where you want to go. I think there were like 6 of them this year. You know, so. All right, so maybe I'll try and get someone to come and talk with us in December. Remember, our meeting on December is going to be the 13th, 2 weeks ahead of when we normally do it. You know, and I did create a schedule, you know, and I'll maybe be able to drop it into the chat in the PDF to it. But I was wondering, do you all like what we are doing this year, where for the last 2 months, we are combining both subcommittees and having a meeting a week or 2 early, and then having the full rock meeting, which is essentially the same as the 2 combined subcommittees, a week after, and just giving a lot of time before the holiday week? Or is that not working? Should we just maybe do 1 meeting a month? I mean, those 2 months, I mean, instead of like 2 full rock meetings, we could do that, you know, or do you want to do what we did the previous year, where we did have the 2 subcommittee meetings and a full rock meeting? Essentially, I'm asking, yeah, how do you feel about what we're doing this year?
I think what we're doing this year works for me. I wouldn't want to see us have just a single meeting of in 1 month for all things together. I think there is still value in having the subcommittees. I don't think that we need to have 2 separate subcommittees for November, December next year. It feels good the way we're doing it this month and next month so far.
Right.
But and of course, I mean, it's always possible to change. I mean, we can decide that in January, no, we should have had 2 subcommittee meetings in November or December. So, but going forward, I think this model for November, December 2023 works.
I think it's been helpful specifically this year because of 2 things: the rather severe interventions in the T maintenance on the subway side, well, in the Green Line downtown, and then also the bus network redesign. And even, I don't know if other folks hopped into last night's meeting, but there were over 400 people in the makeup meeting who couldn't, it was a meeting held because there was so much overflow from the first meeting. But I think there were 400 registered last night.
Oh yeah. I was amazed. I had to leave early, which I don't think I've done in ages. They were still going as of 8:30. They started right at 6, so they were 2.5 hours of public discussion and comment, and I was discouraged and encouraged at the same time. That I was encouraged there was so much turnout. I was discouraged that yet again, numerous people were saying, "I just found out about this."
Yeah.
Well,
That's
that
upsetting.
makes sense.
Huh?
Well, but it makes sense. Most people just use the bus. Most people don't follow, proposed changes, reorganizations, and things like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do. I mean, in terms of what
I understand.
something's going to happen. And if you were to send everyone like a mail, a big like 8x12 card, saying MBTA, you'd still have people saying, I know it's going to happen, because why? They threw it out. They didn't read it. It looks like jumping, maybe the only other thing you could do is like you could have like the local news folks, like lead off breaking news, the MBTA in 1 month is going to hold a meeting, that might get you more, but that's not going to happen,
WBZ radio and, if I'm not mistaken, Channel 5 both mentioned last night's meeting. As a matter of fact, I didn't know about it until I heard it on WBZ yesterday morning. I thought you were going to say announcements. We have the technology to read announcements on buses and trains. I am still kind of shocked that we don't have I'll just say the ability, whether it's a technical constraint or a manpower constraint or both. If I'm riding on a route, if I'm on a bus 123 that's going to be changed by the Better Bus project, and there's a meeting on X date, I would expect there to be an announcement every 15 minutes on the bus saying, this route is scheduled to be changed in the next period, public meeting on this date.
Well, that's a good point. That is a good point. Since I'm hardly riding the buses these days, I wasn't aware that wasn't being done. I only ride it on Saturdays. But
when there's service changes, I've seen 8.5 by 11 laser printed signs taped to the window of buses saying upcoming service change.
Right.
But I've never seen any announcements on vehicles about a public meeting, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm missing them. Maybe I'm missing.
Well, we could ask. We could ask. So those are good points, definitely.
Yeah.
So,
and before I forget, let me just I meant to say this before. It's good, a good timing that we were able to have Representative Garbely this month, because as I think all three of you gents know, we have a tentative acceptance that Senator Crichton, the Senate chair of the Joint Transportation Committee, can join us January 24th.
Wow. That'd be terrific.
Yep. Was there more to talk about with the UPWP other than to say other than what we covered?
I was just taking notes. I was trying to remember what was the note I forgot to take. That is to invite an UPWP rep, talk with us. That's all I have.
Okay. Well, definitely, I'm interested.
Now, invite us to the December meeting, because we don't have anyone lined up for December, right? Or do we?
I'm sorry, I missed a couple words there.
I said we don't have anyone lined up for December, or do we? I know that you reached out to Linda Dillon, and she suggested that we reach out to Rich Dean. Did you follow up with Rich?
I was going to be doing that this week.
All right.
Does that still sound
well,
like a good plan? We'll have a commuter rail
yeah. Yeah, okay, good.
representative for next month's meeting.
Yeah. Well. So then let me know. Maybe we can CC me on it, and I think we can probably even squeeze in UPWP too. So I guess in this case, I don't really need to know whether or not that works out, because I will just ask the UPWP rep to come. I should say CTPS rep to come to talk with us about UPWP, and maybe just yeah, I can work on both.
Sounds great.
All right. We'll talk about that at the executive committee meeting, which will be on December 6th, after the MCOP meeting, right?
The combined meeting, right?
Right, the combined meeting, right? Okay.
Yes. So yeah. So I still don't have those details on my calendar, but I'm going to work on that. Do we want to? Well, look at that. We're right on schedule. 6:20 for committee reports.
Well, there aren't really any committee reports, because that was from that was last meeting, right? Was everyone there at the last meeting that we had? Everyone here was there? Craig?
I was.
I was traveling. I was online for the first 45 minutes and then lost service, but I caught the first half of it.
Yeah. So then we're all pretty much aware. I mean, I forget what happened in the second half of the meeting. And I think we just talked about that work resign the whole time, pretty much. So that was it. So there's no need for committee reports. I left it there because I pretty much used the previous month's meeting as my template before the next month's agenda, and it was just easier to leave it there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't take any notes from last week, and to be honest, I don't think we needed anything annotated.
Right. So let's see. Reports from committees, other committees. So this is going to be my last term as chair of the advisory council. So I was just elected to the 4th term, and that's all I really want to do. It takes me through LRTP cycle, a long range transportation plan cycle, and as I've told people, it's not like I'm tired of it or bored or anything. It's not the case at all. I still feel as if there's lots to learn, but I think it's just healthy for the advisory council, to a large extent, the board itself, to have someone new as chair, and I'm still going to be involved, and I'm going to help out hopefully identify a new chair, get them trained up, so that next year they're ready to take over. Look, I will say it's not my intention to, not because I want to leave the door open, because I don't really want to leave. I just don't want to say never ever, because if I'm needed, I'll do it. But I just want to make it really clear to folks that I think it's just better for me to move out of the position, and let someone else do it, and it'll be good for the board to have someone else in there dealing with someone else. I think institutional knowledge is good, but there are other people there that are serving that function, especially from MassDOT, and so I'll still be around, so that's the news from the advisory council. Other than that, I don't really have anything else to bring up.
Okay. I was just looking at the LRTP and trying to remind myself, what is the time period for that? Is that
It's a 4-year document. It's a 4-year
plan.
Thank you. And this one, I think, is going to go out to 2050.
Oh, no, 20. Oh, you're right. Yeah.
The next one's going to go out to 2050. Yeah. No, approaching a time where it's like, oh, I may not be alive and I'd like to be. I'm not sure I will be.
But that document is like a year-long process, right? I mean,
Well, it's like it's a year. It's an intense 9,
yeah,
12 months. I mean, we're really kind of kicking. We're in first gear. We're about to kick out into second gear. Because it should be signed off on by the end of the federal fiscal year, next year. I mean, so we need to sign off on it. I think by the end of September, and I think we really want to have that thing signed off on probably by the end of August.
yeah. There's always a little crunch at the end. One of the things I used to enjoy about that was when Tim Reardon or whoever was doing the background number crunching for the MAPC
Right.
came in. That was always interesting to me, kind of the land use foundation and the socioeconomic foundation that kind of underlies the long-term regional transportation plan.
Yeah. Well, he's coming in to present at that meeting, so the demographics are pretty interesting with respect to that, especially with the as you know, the COVID's kind of like throwing things out of whack. And so they've done what they need to do, and now we are finishing up work on the travel demand model. And so about to release the alpha version of it, so we had a meeting on that today.
Who's in charge of that?
Marty Milkovich.
Okay.
Yeah, he comes out of Florida. He's good. So they've done a lot of work on that. I mean, essentially all the components are in, and now it's really it's all about model validation at this point.
Have the traffic analysis zones changed at all?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So,
just for others here, the TAZs are kind of the base unit,
right?
For these analyses, and I think there used to be 2,727 in the plan, but I'm not sure. I might have that number wrong.
Yeah. I don't think so, Wig. I mean, I feel as if I should really know that, yes or no, hard, cold.
Oh no, that's okay. I'm way out of date on it.
But that would have been something that would have been decided like at the beginning of the process, and so that was discussed early on. I just don't remember.
Yeah, it's okay.
So, well, I guess we can wrap this up early.
Okay. Good to see you, Craig.
No one watching on YouTube. I was momentarily distracted there, removing some spam in the YouTube chat. But
oh, that's too bad.
Yep.
Gosh.
Hey, Craig, I'm sorry. Craig, I could never see that switch, but your comment made me just use my fingers, and yeah, so I appreciate it.
I can't believe it's been a couple months. That's the funny thing.
Yeah, no, I thought I just had hit a setting as opposed to something physical like that. I knew about the switch before, but I never could see it. So
yeah, well, it's not obvious. I mean, the mechanical stuff is like that gets me also. And I tell you, there've been times when I've looked at a laptop, someone else's laptop, and it's like, where is the on button? Where is it? You don't see it there, and it's like, is it around back? Is it on the side? Because when you don't know, it's like, where is it? You have no confidence in it, and it's like, what's supposed to be? So I get it. And I probably would have, been.
But thank you very much. Okay, right. Guys, should we call it a night?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Good night, guys.
Thanks for the rep, Glenn. Take care.
Yes. Thank you all, and see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Have a good Thanksgiving as well.
Yeah.